Really just... You're going to town on that, aren't you? Fair enough, you can be in this one. So mixing synths with heavy guitars is getting more and more common. It's not a new thing, but it's definitely something which I think has become a real staple in modern metal, particularly in genres like metalcore. And something a lot of people struggle with when they first try doing this is to get the synths and the guitars playing nicely together. These are instruments that really want to occupy the same piece of sonic real estate, and so getting those two competing elements to sit nicely in a mix and be powerful without taking away what makes one or the other great can be a real challenge. So I'd like to show you my approach and how I go about doing this, and try and do it in a really minimalistic way that doesn't involve a really long and complicated signal chain. So let's jump into it. So here we are in a session for a track that has quite a lot of synth and guitar going on. I say quite a lot of guitar, pretty standard two main rhythm guitars left and right, but they're big, fat, distorted guitars. So I'll play you the whole mix as it sounds as an end product, and then we'll go through how we got to there. Big wall of noise. Now, if we look at this, we can listen to the synths by themselves just by playing this synth bus. So here's all of the synths that are going on in that section there. Four separate synths all going at once, some of it going to a shimmer reverb. A lot happening just by itself. That's a really dense piece of music. And then over on the guitars, this is what we've got happening. That's no minor thing either. Big, fat, distorted guitar riff. And these two things, like I said, really want to sit in the same part of the mix and lose something if you don't give them the ability to do so. So a lot of tutorials on this subject talk about going in and carving out frequency regions with an EQ so that everything has its own place to sit in the mix. And there's definitely some merit in that approach to a degree. You certainly don't want a huge amount of build-up in certain places in the frequency spectrum. That can either lead to muddiness or overly harsh sounds when you get build-up in, say, the low mids or the top end. But sometimes when you take away frequencies, say frequencies in a lead synth to make space for a rhythm guitar, that lead synth loses its mojo. It kind of loses its reason for being in the mix, but you really like it, so you still want it to be there. So how do we work with this? I think firstly we need to accept that this idea of carving out space for everything in the mix, whilst it's an interesting concept and, like I said, has some merit to a degree, if you go too crazy on this, you're going to wind up with everything sounding super separated, and you're not going to have a cohesive sound to your mix. What you're doing is mixing. You want things to overlap, but you want them to overlap in a nice way. So let's have a look at our synths. You'll notice here that we do have a lot of EQ going on the synth channels. And this EQ is doing a bit of work to keep things sitting nicely in the mix. But if we have a look, we're not doing things that are carving out frequency ranges here. If you'll look, I've got a similar boost on this gated hypersaw over here that I do on this lead synth that's doubling the guitars. We're hiking things up in that kind of 500 to 600 hertz range. They're both getting a little bit of a tickle up in the top end. I'm notching a bit of presence out here because this one got really harsh. This is the guitar double synth. If we left that in, but really similar moves there. Counterintuitively, you'd say, oh well, that's putting them both in the same place in the mix. Surely that's going to create issues, but it doesn't. If we play these two together just by themselves, they work fine, and that's because the melodic content of them is different enough to separate them. So don't get too obsessed with this idea of carving out EQ ranges, and that's going to be the magic solution that gets everything sitting where you want. Focus more on what the sound is doing, what's the sound bringing to the overall mix. That gated hypersaw is a kind of constant top end, rhythmic piece, whereas the other one, as we've said, is doubling the guitars, so it's serving a much similar role to the rhythm guitars. If we bring in the synth bass, this kind of growler bass that's going on in here, we can hear again, it's bringing something else to the mix, even with no EQ on it. Occupying its own space, not just in the mix, but in the composition. And so that's true for all of the synths that we have going on in this part. We'll bring in the fourth one, it's a trance bass, and that's just a real punchy, rhythmic, in-your-face kind of synth. Again, no EQ on this. So the takeaway here is that the most important thing is not just to layer up a bunch of synths, because you can, even though that is fun. The most important move I've made here is getting the levels right so that they're not fighting each other from a volume perspective. They're already occupying their own space in the composition, and they're occupying their own space in the frequency spectrum, so you just need to get the volumes right. So how does this apply to the guitars? Well, it's the same concept. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your guitars are serving a specific function within the composition, and then the rest of it becomes so much easier. Yes, we're doubling these guitars with a synth, but that means that we're actually quite happy for them to occupy the same piece of sonic real estate. It's the whole point, is that the synth thickens up the guitars. So that immediately eliminates one of the synths that we need to worry about. Then it's just about balancing levels. So the first step is we need to dial in a guitar tone that we like on its own, and then fine tune it so that it sits in the overall mix nicely. And then we're going to take one really simple step that gets it to play nicely with the synths. So I'll walk you through it. So without any processing on it, the guitar tone sounds like this. This is all done using the Neural DSP Fortin Nameless suite, by the way. Here's the amp settings I'm using. Cab, it's a 57 with a 121 on it, out on the cone, providing a bit of beef. This is all covered in the in-depth mix breakdown that I've done for this song, which I'll add a card for here. So that's our raw tone. And we're running that into a rhythm guitar bus where we're doing the most of the processing, or all of the processing for the rhythm guitars. The first thing we're doing is adding this sort of surgical or tone shaping EQ. And what we're doing here is really just addressing some of the sort of problem areas that we get coming out of the plugin. It's the same principle if you're doing an actual mic'd up speaker cab. You're going to get resonances and things like that you just want to notch out to clean up and make the overall sound a bit more kind of pliable and compliant for fitting it into a mix. So you see we've got a few big notches there. That's just addressing some hissy, whistly frequencies from the cab. Bit of a scoop around the mids, this very mid-forward guitar tone. And this little notch down here just serves to get rid of some of that kind of woofy, almost kind of sine wavy stuff that you can get. There's not a lot of chugging in this riff, but there is a lot of short, sharp palm muting, and so it just kind of tames that in. So I'll drop this in and you'll hear immediately it cleans up a bit. Way more focused, way tighter. So immediately we've got a guitar tone that's sounding a little bit more mix ready. And that's one that you could do in solo. I'd still recommend doing it in the context of the mix. But that's some real basic, just, clean up those notches you're always going to get rid of, because those harsh frequencies are just not nice. Now at this point, we've got a nice guitar tone. And if we were to play it in the whole mix, but with the synths dropped out, doesn't sound too bad. Definitely still something missing from the mix, but overall, not a bad guitar tone. We could roll with that. But if we play that same section of the song with all of those synths turned on, listen to the guitars just disappear. They're just falling right back in the mix. They're not right up in your face the way you want this to be. And this tone is pretty aggressive. It's not like we've been delicate with it. So you might think intuitively, oh, we'll just turn it up. Let's see what happens if we do that. Yeah, we can hear them better, but those low mids suddenly are getting real woofy. We're getting all of this kind of really nasty build up in that low mids because there's just too much of them. We're bringing up everything, and that guitar tone, one of the things that's great about it is it's got a nice bit of low mid thump. But if we then go in and EQ that out, we lose a bit of that from the guitar tone. It loses some of what we like about it. And you get in this endless cycle of trying to turn up the volume, re-EQ it, turn it back down, re-EQ it. The simplest thing to do is to think, right, what do I like about this tone and what's going to make it jump out of the mix? And all we're going to do is add a bit of flavor EQ, as I call it. I prefer to use this particular channel strip when I'm doing this kind of EQing. One, because it sounds amazing. I just love the sound of this SSL channel strip. Any of the versions of it, they all sound good. And two, because it has no complicated GUI, you kind of just have to listen until it sounds like what you want. And then that way you wind up with moves that might look a bit wild if you're using a graphic EQ, but you don't second guess them here because all you've got is your ears. And all we're doing to get these guitars to jump out of the mix is two moves: a high mid boost and a low mid boost. And those are centered around 2.4K and about 1.1, 1.2 respectively. And they're big boosts. This is the key. We're boosting by 3.5 dB on the high mid and 4.7 on the low mid. And this is where you got to be not afraid to make really big moves. And the other thing is, this might not sound very good in solo. And I'll show you what I mean. Playing just these rhythm guitars, I'm going to toggle this on and off, and you'll hear what I mean. In solo, when you drop that in, suddenly it sounds a bit sort of nasally and honky, and you think, ugh, that's not really what I'm after. But now I'm going to do the same thing, toggle this on and off in the context of the mix, and listen to what it does. There it is. There's the guitar tone. It helps them jump out, get right in your face, super aggressive. We've got loads of that attack, loads of that kind of pick attack, I guess you'd say, a real kind of presence to it. And that's just coming from those two boosts. The in-your-face feel is coming from this big 4.7 dB boost at around 1.1 to 1.2K. That range, that kind of 1 to 1.5K range, that's your in-your-face frequency. I'll show you what I mean. If we play this, and I'll leave the boost on where it is, and I'll sweep this around, and you'll hear that around that kind of 1 to 1.2 K mark is the sweet spot for this tone. You can see when I went down too low, it wasn't really coming right out of the mix and in your face like you wanted it to. When I went too high, it started getting a little bit too kind of whistly and hissy, which we don't want, starting to bring out some of those nasty resonances in the cab. Similar thing on this high mid one. I'll do the same thing. I'll leave the boost where it is and I'll sweep the frequency around, and you'll hear that there's a real sweet spot where we're getting that kind of presence and attack. So you can see again, if we go down too low, we're just kind of treading all over this boost and creating this huge honky nasal mid-range. If we go higher, there's actually some kind of nice stuff up there. You start getting into real kind of that super pick attacky range up around kind of 4K. But for what I was going for, this 2.4K boost was just bang on. So what's the takeaway here? First and foremost, make sure that every element in your mix is doing a job, serving a purpose within the composition. If you can't assign a purpose to an element, then ask yourself whether it really needs to be there. And then you can move on to worrying about whether the element is doing its job as well as it possibly can. And in this regard, don't worry too much about carving out individual frequency ranges. Don't get into that mindset of, oh, I've cut 250 here, so then I need to boost 250 here and vice versa. Obviously, be wary of things like low mid buildup and harshness in your upper mids and high frequencies, but address those problems when they are problems. Don't try to preempt them before they become an issue. Just trust your ears. If it sounds good, it is good. Third is to not be afraid to make some pretty big moves to get things to sit in the mix the way you want them to. We saw with those guitars, we did some pretty big boosts and some pretty, busy frequency ranges, and it worked fantastically. It got the guitars to sit right up in your face. It got a lot of that attack and aggression in there that we were looking for, that we weren't able to hear before we put that EQ on. Trust your ears. Don't worry about whether a move is too big. If it sounds good, it is good. 4.7 dB at 1.1K might sound ridiculous, but it worked in that context. Those big moves can be the difference between a part working perfectly in the mix and doing what it needs to do, and something that you struggle to hear and can't really get working properly. So make the big moves, commit to it. If you like it, roll with it, and don't worry about whether it looks like too much. So I hope you enjoyed the video and either learned something or got some ideas that you can run with now. If there's any other topics that you want me to cover in other videos, then chuck a comment down below. I'm more than happy to take suggestions and feedback. If you're interested in hearing the song that this video is based around, the links to all of that are in the description below as well. If you enjoyed the video, please do chuck us a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.